Greetings and welcome to Matrix Unlocked presentation 42. This was intended to be a live presentation because I can talk for a bit longer and also have the interaction with anybody listening who wants to make comments on points I raise or to ask questions. But after 20 minutes of trying to go live, I thought, well, it's just not happening. So I tried again just now, no joy. After the initial attempt, I thought, oh, well, I'll just use the mobile phone and do the recording that you're listening to now, only to find that the battery had gone completely flat. So I'm just rather glad that I didn't announce that I was going live today. So I've been thinking about many things just lately. Things come to me and from listening to other people, what they've got to say, their ideas. And I've been thinking about this all-seeing eye. Now I've suggested that we are actually on the iris of what is a giant eyeball. So the all-seeing eye could in fact be what we think of as the North Pole, which is the equivalent of the pupil of the eye. Now, just as we have two eyes, and when you think about it, we use more than five senses most of the time without even realizing it. If you're watching and listening to something, then obviously you're using your sight and your hearing. Then you also have, of the other senses, you have what people call the sixth sense, the one that is your intuition that tells you if something feels right to you. So this all-seeing eye, everybody thinks of the back of the dollar bill. But what if this all-seeing eye, and you can call it God if you want, but the source of everything, I prefer to call it, that created everything. Maybe it's working in, just like we have two eyes, that is seeing in two ways. For a start, you've got the stars, and then what you can get from astrology from the positions of them. I'll come back to that bit in a minute because there's more to that. There is also the spiritual connection with, or you could call it collective consciousness as well. So maybe we're actually getting information in more than one way. Through the spiritual and through this interaction with the stars. Now, you know, when you look at a pond, you get a reflection, not just of yourself, but other things that happen to be behind you, the tallest trees and things you're going to see in that as well. But it's a reflection. Now, what I'm going to suggest is it's not just the sun and the moon, or what we think of the sun and the moon as being a projection up from this, what we call the North Pole. I'm suggesting that it is everything, and perhaps those stars and their movement is somehow connected to us. We are the stars, as it were. So our movements are shown and reflected on this ceiling that we call the dome. Now, what exactly is the sun and the moon? Well, quite simply, I have no idea. But what I'm going to suggest is this, that what you are actually seeing is a magnetic or an electromagnetic projection, or projections, I should say, onto this dome or ceiling. And it is only when it interacts with this ether, or whatever this dome layer is made from, is when you see the outcome of it. A bit like electricity. You can't actually see it, you can only see the action of it. Yes, you'll see the sparks, if it's a live wire, for example, and when it's just sort of thrashing about on the ground, like in oh, I can't think of the name. There was a series of films where they were trying to cheat death, and this force sort of managed to snap these wires, so they're just like dancing around like snakes on the ground and sparking. So I'm suggesting the sun and the moon, it's what you're actually seeing is this almost like an invisible force. I would suggest that the sun, or whatever is projecting this phenomenon we call the sun, will be seen in the ultraviolet extreme of visible light, beyond the senses of the human eye. Likewise, what we consider to be the moon, I would suggest, is the opposite end of the spectrum, the infrared. Now I've done this little drawing to illustrate what I mean. So if you imagine you've got, get the pencil right, there's the surface of the Earth, there's the North Pole. Now it is projecting up a positive magnetism or electromagnetism, and then when it gets to the dome, that's when we see this thing called the sun. And then you also have a negative projection going up to the moon. Now this is also where you could say where you get the SOL from as well, because S for sun, L for lunar. Earth is a hole, and it would be like a hole of some kind here to project out. And also maybe all the other stars. Think of it like a baby's mobile. And you'll notice, I mean, possibly you could have a complete circuit. So it's got the positive going up to the sun, going across to the moon and back down, forming this triangle. But as above, so below, I'm suggesting that the Earth, because it is the earthing point between these two torus fields, there is an equal and opposite of both. So it forms like an X. You've also, from that, you'll see you've got the four corners of Earth, and then right in the middle there is the source of everything. So I'm suggesting that this thing that's called God is, we're actually on it, in it, whatever way you want to think of it. Now, the reason I've entitled this as Fox Crossed, just to recap, E representing energy. You'll notice it has 3 horizontal lines. Now the F is incomplete, so it's incomplete, that's the whole energy, and it's crossed. So it's incomplete anyway, and then it's been crossed, which is why so many things that we are told are looking to be either the opposite or a mixture of truth, or half truth, half lie. And also, while I was thinking about making this video, look at the opening sequence of the I think it's 20th Century Fox, where you've got the searchlights. Now I'm suggesting that the sun and the moon are pretty much, you've got a magnetic beam going up, and it is the interaction where it hits the dome, and then we see these things that manifest that we think are the sun and the moon. Because certainly the moon, you can see stars through it. The sun at when it's low to the earth, again, apparently you could, I haven't actually seen this for myself, but other people have said that you can see stars through it. And certainly there is a big difference between light and the heat aspects of this. The two things, it's not an exploded star, as NASA and everybody else will tell us. I mean, you can totally write that off as a load of rubbish. There's too many tests being done independently, going across faster distances of water, which the curve calculator says you can't actually see, but you actually can see them. But of course, like everything else, they won't say, okay, well, we've got the calculations wrong. No, they're just trying to suppress any alternative viewpoint. and it is almost like a high priesthood. I don't know why we even bother with these people. It's fraudulent with universities what they're teaching people because it's not based on the truth in the first place. So I thought I would just put that out there as an idea. I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's correct at all. I am just offering it as an idea that if you think of the dome as a ceiling, well, it is a ceiling, but think of it like with a baby's mobile where it projects these images up onto the ceiling of the room that they're in, that is exactly what all these luminaries, whether you want to call them planets or whatever, the sun, the moon, all the stars, they are all reflections of something magnetic that once it interacts with this ether or whatever the dome happens to be, that is when we can see it with our physical eyes. Obviously, a lot of things you need telescopes because they're outside of the range of human eyesight projection. Because I think it's something like 3 miles for absolute clarity, and then beyond that you can still see things. But obviously, the definition gets less and less and less with distance. But I don't think we're actually looking that high up at all. But we do get a lot of nonsense told to us about all these things. So, I mean, think about. It's amazing how much interest and intrigue there is about what is above us, but it is not with the same interest or there is no drive to actually explore what is below us. That there is that Kohler drilling experiment, there are deep oil well drills, but they only go to about a distance of 8 miles. So what really is down there, and how far does it go down, and what is beyond that? These are the things we just, well, like everything else, we don't have a reference point. This is another very interesting thing. When you're at Dover, you've got those white cliffs and you have the sea. Now, when you get to the River Thames, the water is still the same level, but you haven't got these great big high cliffs to the edge of the River Thames. And it does seem to be a gentle progression from Kent going across with a few rolling hills, but nothing significant, certainly no mountains. And it does seem to be a general downward progression. And the further west you go, it seems to be dropping even further. Another interesting thing from my own observations where I am here, particularly in the summer, where the sun is rising, as it were, in the sky, is right round to the northeast. When it, what we call sets, it is right round heading more towards northwest. From my perspective, it looks like the sun is circling around something further north than me, but it's supposed not to be. It's supposed to be curving away from me. The further it goes west, it should be getting should be going the opposite way, going more towards the southwest. But certainly in the summer, it goes to the northwest and starts in the northeast. Doesn't make obviously a complete circle that I can see. But I thought that was very interesting, and that is a personal observation on that one. But the thing is to not get too bogged down with the fine details and start arguing amongst ourselves. There's already been way too much over the perceived edge or whatever. The one thing that is clear about this is none of us actually know, and things are put in place so we can't actually go and verify this, and that in itself is alarm bells as to why can't we do that, because I would love to know for definite what exactly we are on or in. But from what I've seen, I would definitely go with the whole flat Earth idea. Now, a lot of people have said, "Oh, the sun and the moon on the model is wrong." Well, don't forget that we're not seeing something at right angles to the surface. It seems to be at a very oblique angle. As I understand it, the further south you go towards this Antarctic, it's actually a lot lower in the sky. And I would suggest that it is this dome is working like a concave lens or a series of lenses. And so when you're in the what they call the northern hemisphere, and it's much higher above where I am, that it's more closer to the top of the dome, and then as what we call sunrise and sunset, it is lower in the sky from my perspective. So I'm seeing it at a very oblique angle. It's not at 90 degrees above me at any point. It is always further away, and you can never sort of stand, or don't seem to be able to stand right under it. It always seems to be moving, and in a conversation I had earlier, it seems to be seen differently by different people, and I can't help but think of these religious depictions with these halos. Maybe these stars and things are our projections of our soul or spirit, and that is what it's really showing. There's just a few ideas I thought I'd put out there. I don't know the answers. That is the one thing I will say about all this, that the more we investigate into things, the less we actually know, and we don't have a point of reference which we can go back to, like, for example, where did we come from, how old are we, where the true sea level is, and all these questions that just keep coming out from this. What also comes out of this is there seems to be this deliberate plan to deceive us and keep us from the truth. And to end on a positive note as well, whilst on one hand we seem to know nothing at all, this seems to be balanced with this growing spiritual connection between all of us. And I've suggested before that this is magnetic energy, and it is far stronger and far more powerful than the electrical energy. If this is making sense to you for a start, and you're still listening, and I thank you for taking the time out to listen to this, but I think you won't be thinking to yourself, what is he talking about? Now, if you think about what you've been through individually in your lives, and you're still bucking the trend on the official narrative, and you're asking those awkward questions they don't want you to ask, and you're aware of things in a different way from the majority of other people, you're getting information coming to you that just comes into your mind, these synchronized thoughts, this collective consciousness. There's a growing number of us that are going through all these experiences, and that to me shows that is where this will be won. There is so much that is put out there that we cannot verify or know whether it's true, whether it's half-truth, whether it's been manipulated by computer programs. The technology is there to superimpose a face over a body and use an actor's voice, and it looks, to all intents and purposes, like it is the person you think it is saying on the news, and it turns out to be total fabrication and no way of actually verifying whether it's true or not. You'll notice also how the finger is pointed at the social media as being all false information, but there is not the same investigation into the mainstream media, and I find it rather ironic that the mainstream media will say the social media is all telling lies, but they're quite happy to advertise on the social media to try and promote their newspapers and television companies. So it's a bit of a double standard to do that anyway. But as been shown through its own actions, for example, the BBC in the UK is not exactly honest with their version of the truth. It is definitely fitting a narrative. And it is at a very subtle level with a lot of these television programs. They are dangerous. It is a form of mind control. It is talking to your subconscious. There's no two ways about it. I would seriously suggest that to totally unplug from any of it and just don't even bother with it, because it's just theatre at the end of the day. If you want to watch the soap operas, there's plenty to choose from. I mean, they're not just these supposed real life things. There can be politics or whatever. It's just a load of mind numbing distraction to keep you away from discovering the truth, which is really all about going inside and being honest with yourself. To say, look, I was fooled at one time. I don't mind admitting this, because I fell for a lot of the things. But since I've unplugged from it all, it's a wonderful experience. I am getting news, you could say. Now, if you think of a newspaper, I mean, that's obviously a very thin slice of a tree that's been killed. But when it comes to this timber that I'm working on, and as I'm scraping all the varnish off, it's very therapeutic. But this is how I spent my time, and cool, have I made my fingers sore with these razor blades scraping? But it's very therapeutic, and as I'm revealing this beautiful grain in this wood, it does feel like it is communicating. And I would suggest that a lot of this, what we call spiritual information that is coming, is not necessarily coming down from above, as it were, but it's coming up from earth. Because there's so much talk of earthing and walking barefoot and being in contact with nature. Well, to me, Earth is a living being, a living organism. Whether it is a giant eyeball, I really don't know. I can't go up high enough to look down on it and say, yes, it definitely is, or no, it isn't. And here is the genuine photos to prove it. I wish I could. I would love to do that. Just for the peace of mind for myself as much as anything else. But maybe once we've got this control system out the way, we can see what's really going on. But certainly the picture that is emerging is that what is planned, all the doom and gloom, a lot of it is put out there as negative energy, because the negative energy feeds on the fear that it can generate. So there's always half-truths in these things, and I think they've gone too far, and a lot of you are also sensing that it's like a final spiritual battle, and we are going to win. Well, we have won this, because it's this funny concept of time again, but that falls apart straight away, particularly with the live feeds when I'm talking to somebody or talking to an audience that may be made up from Australians and Americans, people in the UK, other parts of Europe and elsewhere in the world, and we're all watching at the same time, but the time is different in the zone you're in, but the time is just an illusion. It's just a way of tracking things and keeping us all in order. Obviously there is a practical side of it when you're meeting friends and things. I'm not even going to go there with jobs, because that's the debt slave system. But that's just my thoughts on this. But yeah, do please let me know what you think. Maybe some of the things I've said will spark something and you'll think, oh yeah, or you'll be able to expand on it. Please do. I'm not asking for credit for any of this. It's just all about the spreading the information, looking at things with fresh eyes, and continuing to question. Anyway, I wish you all a wonderful day. There is another follow-up video coming all about star thoughts. Thank you.